With Green Shield stamps, the extra discount on everything you buy.
Back in the 60s and 70s, supermarket price wars were pretty tame affairs. Tesco's offered their Green Shield stamps, redeemable for free gifts, and that was about it. But then, with Sainsbury's still trading on its reputation for quality and choice, arch-rivals Tesco changed tactics.
Well, stamps were going out of fashion, very evidently. We were into double, triple, even quadruple stamps. The public really were not interested.
And I was going around the stores and the customers were giving the stamps back to the cashiers. Now, for a promotion, that's ridiculous. So it was quite clear that the customers didn't want them.
But Jack Cohen did. He was determined to fight for his beloved stamps, even though they were costing him £20 million a year.
Jack Cohen was extremely tense about it. Was foaming at the mouth and screaming and shouting.
A board meeting was held to vote on whether they should dump Green Shield stamps.
So that board meeting was a very tense board meeting. We had the vote, and I think it was 5-5, and I had a letter in my pocket from David Behar, who was a non-executive director. I'd written to David and said, I want your vote for coming out of stamps. And he wrote back to me and said, Ian, you have my vote. I can't stand the sticky little things. So we win 6-5. So there was a bit of a sort of silence for a while. Anyway, we'd won the vote 6-5. And during that meeting, I think Jack insisted that the vote was taken probably another 4 or 5 times, and we still won at the end of the day 6-5.
What happened next was one of the most audacious moves in retail history. Tesco launched Operation Checkout. The war for high street supremacy would be fought on a battlefield called price.
We closed all our shops down on a Saturday night, and we whitewashed all the windows. We said to the public at large, we will be opening the stores again with a new offering which you will think is fantastic on Wednesday. And we took a big gamble then, because we got all our advertising for the Thursday, not the Wednesday. All our competitors put huge advertising in for the Wednesday, trying to combat us. We could then see exactly what they'd done on the Wednesday, changed our advertising as we needed to do on the Wednesday night, came out on Thursday morning with Operation Checkout, and it was just an enormous success. It was just amazing.
I believe Sainsbury's were caught on the hop because they did not believe that we were going to reduce the prices to the degree that we did.
So began a bitter contest between the two biggest supermarket chains. Nowhere more aggressive than over the price of that totem of the cost of living index, the humble baked bean. The retailers desperately needed to cut costs, so they took on the market leaders and challenged them with cheaper own-brand beans.
Supermarkets were steadily driving the price of beans down. There was a constant, particularly in the trade press, there was constant revelation of the latest lowest price.
For over a period of weeks, we saw the price of B brand, as we call it, beans, going from 14 to 15p all the way to 9p, and at its lowest level hit threepence a can.
Heinz were not amused at being challenged by own-brand beans so cheap the supermarkets were making a loss on every can.
Well, obviously we said, well, what's going on? Isn't this ludicrous? Why are you taking this action?
In the end, it fell to one independent supermarket owner, himself a victim of the beans means losses policy, to do something unheard of.
The cheapest we could buy, the cheapest, nastiest beans for, was about 20-25 pence, something like that. And we believed that to be in front of the baked bean war at that time, we certainly had to be selling them at about 3 pence. Well, if you're going to start losing money like that, I seem to remember saying in a meeting we were having, well, you may as well give the blooming things away. Well, hang on a minute, why don't we really make a stir and actually give people money to take them away? So that's just what we did.
I believe it's one of the first cases of negative retailing on record. But that just shows you how ridiculous it did get.
As the 70s recession turned into the 80s boom, the supermarket battleground shifted again. Shoppers had money and retailers sought out new ways to relieve them of it. Supermarket aisles became the catwalks of food fashion.
We had pies, sausages, produce items coming in, variety of lettuce types, Lolla Rossa, Lolla Bonda, which probably the British public had only ever bought from a very specialist shop previously. Now it was available in our stores. So the opportunities just exploded in the early 80s.
There is no product, no matter how lowly, that has not been restyled and rebranded in the last few years. Lettuce, case in point. Bear with me. I mean, every now and then, don't you hanker after a bit of lettuce that's green, like it used to be? I don't want all my lettuce purple. Lettuce isn't supposed to be all purple and crinkly. It's supposed to be green and flat. I don't want sunflower petals on my salad. Not always. I want a bit of grated cheese and half a boiled egg like the old days.
But the shifting tides of food fashion came at a terrible price for some. Helen Bailey and her husband Gordon grew traditional lettuces in the early 80s, so successfully that their farm was featured on local TV. The couple wanted to exploit the full potential of their business and concluded that the only way was to work with the #1 supermarket chain.
As the time went on, we could see that if we wanted to get anywhere, we needed to expand and grow bigger and then look for bigger markets. Then my husband had the idea about supplying supermarkets, as they were becoming sort of more where everybody used to shop rather than go to the markets or the little greengrocers.
Sainsbury's offered them a deal, no contract as such, but they could have a product programme, which they understood to mean becoming an exclusive supplier.
You didn't actually have a fixed contract with a fixed price and they would say they would take X amount. It was always a programme and they would say, right, we will need X amount at this month and this month, and we will gauge the price at this particular time, but that would fluctuate. So you weren't allowed to supply anybody else. If Tesco's or another supermarket had approached us, then that would have been the end of us with Sainsbury's. You know, they wouldn't entertain that at all.
But to keep up with Sainsbury's changing quality standards, they had to install expensive new equipment or face having the supply programme terminated.
We then had to decide, do you go forward or do you go backwards? And we had a lot of advice from different people, the bank, the agricultural board in London. My husband went to a meeting there and discussed it. Yes, it was all very sound and all very good, and yes, you should go ahead.
But then, having invested everything in meeting Sainsbury's exacting standards, the demand for traditional lettuces nosedived. Supermarket customers wanted iceberg lettuces, not the variety Gordon was growing.
What had been a slow, steady movement suddenly became a dramatic leap almost. Very gentle movement each year, suddenly just crash. Round lettuce became practically unsaleable.
The supermarkets weren't interested any longer. It was time to sort of say, well, I'm sorry, we don't want it. But from our point of view, we'd already done the investment, we'd done the work. The things were sitting there in the fields waiting to be harvested to send to them as they had programmed us at the beginning of the year and asked for, but no longer needed. They pulled the plug and just left us to deal with the produce as best we could.
The consequence was devastating. Without Sainsbury's programme, Gordon went bankrupt. The receivers moved in, and the family were left with practically nothing. Even their wedding presents were sold off. Gordon, in particular, found it difficult to cope.
As time goes by, one begins to feel a bit numb about it. Given the situation, you either live or die. On balance, it's live.
Was there ever a time when you felt you could not face going on living?
There was a period last winter.
And what prevented you taking that move?
2 kids.
"13 years later, Gordon Bailey killed himself. Helen believes he never recovered from the bankruptcy.
there was a period when I thought about how could they do such a thing and